Welcome to the Liverpool Community Podcast. I'm your host, Chase Johnson Lynch, here at the Big Condo Studios. And I got to tell you, every moment I'm in this chair is fascinating because I get to meet interesting people from the community, find out a bit about their story, and share it with you, and hope that you enjoy hearing from them as much as I do. Now, today, we have an excellent guest. It's kind of like one of those, what do you call that? Oh man, I can't figure it out. Like the legacy person that's coming from someone else. Like we've had his wife on the show a couple of times and everything. And then it's like, we finally got the man himself. Stephen Powell, an author, a writer, and a writer who has wrote a fantastic biography that is coming out in February, and you will be a chance to go and purchase this book that is in my hand. Ooh, look at how I feel it. Look at this. You know what I mean? It says you did cut to my guest already, did you? Says "Love Me, Fierce in Danger," written by Steven Powell. Hello, Steven.
Hello, Chase. Thank you for having me on.
You don't mind me touching the book like that, do you? First of all, Phil, I am a major fan of James Ellroy, even though I got him confused earlier with Elmore Leonard. But I am a major fan of James Ellroy, and you are too, because I will tell you, just only a couple of the stories that he has written. The Black Dahlia, right? White Jazz. What was it? Demon Dog?
Demon Dog's what he calls himself, the demon dog of American crime fiction. He was very savvy about that. He invented a nickname for himself that sticks in your mind, and it kind of suits his kind of wild, eccentric personality.
Exactly. But the main one that everyone will know is L.A. Confidential and stuff. Now, what we have the pleasure of talking to his biographer, Stephen, is that we're going to share some stories about the man himself, James Ellroy, and everything, but also about the films that he turns out that he hated. I mean, come on. I mean, he's a writer. He's entitled to what did you do to my stuff? Because he had a particular writing style. Let's just talk about that first. He had a particular writing style, didn't he? I mean, I think they called it some kind of grammatical grammatical kind of thing because he would actually take out words
Yeah.
because he hated to lose subplots because
Yeah.
he had too long of a story. Tell me a little bit about his writing style?
Well, it originally came about almost by accident because when LA Confidential was being published by Warner Books, there was an editor who said, the book's far too long. It was about 800 pages.
Mm-hmm.
You need to cut a third of it for the sake of publishing costs. And he was adamant that he couldn't lose a subplot or a character or anything. And then he was sitting one day with his agent, Nat Sobel, and Nat joked, oh, well, maybe we could just cut out a couple of words. And went through the manuscript and cut out a word here and a word there. And then Ellroy's like, give me the pen. He was cutting out words left, right, and center, what he deemed unnecessary words like adverbs and whatnot. And then he showed him the page, and Nat was like, how can I read this? He's like, no, let me read it to you. And James started reading it, and the pace, the tone was like incendiary. It was really riveting. And then James said, I'm going to do this for the entire book. So he subsequently did, and he cut out as many pages as he needed to meet the demands of that editor, and his style was born, and he's kept doing it ever since.
And it created kind of like a staccato in the rhythm in the way people talk to each other. I mean, his characters and stuff, didn't it?
Yes, definitely. It created this kind of sparse style of kind of characters bouncing off each other. Yeah, this kind of urban dialect, which he's very good at with Angelino dialect, but also, different racial dialects and everything. There were times when it was felt like he'd taken it too far because when he first started writing for Alfred A. Knopf, the publisher, Sonny Mehta, who was one of the very famous editors in New York, looked at his first draft and said, it's too sparse, it's too toned down, it's too pared down. I'm struggling to read it. He's like, take it away and put some words back in. So it rebounded on him, but he did, and I think there were times when he was just like, yes, I need to fatten up the prose here and there, because we could call it Ellrovian. It really became his signature style and something that set him apart from other crime writers, because there's a pretty crowded field. There are many crime writers, many very good ones. So to make your own work distinctive was definitely the challenge, which he did.
Well, I mean, you had like Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler. You had these kind of writings, but then, to call himself the demon dog of crime fiction, it was like, would you say that he decided to go down the dark side of his heroes? Especially like with Lloyd Hopkins, because that was his like first three books was about this Lloyd Hopkins character, wasn't it?
Yeah, Lloyd Hopkins was one of his early characters, which he was advised to write that character because he was told series characters are where the money is, and you develop an audience or readership through a series character. But he was never entirely happy with that. You mentioned Chandler and Hammett. There's a quote he's very fond of, where he said, Raymond Chandler wrote the man he wanted to be. Dashiell Hammett wrote the man he was afraid he was.
Ooh.
So yeah, that was pretty good. So he definitely was wanted to show the dark side of these characters, particularly his protagonists, the leading men, the dark side of the cops or detectives or the people you're actually rooting for. You're rooting for them despite their tendency to violence, their traumas and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously being a good writer, his stories would change into films, and so like one of his Lloyd Hopkins books was changed into a movie called Cop, what James was, and like now this character it wasn't just dark; he was super dark. I mean, he was like the kind of guy who would like tell his partner like, "Hey, you take the guy in, and I'm gonna take the girl home, and she's supposed to be a victim, and he'll go and have sex with her, or he'll be into drink and drugs and cheating on his wife. He was just a nasty piece of work, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of his many eccentric touches was that he would tell his daughter bedtime stories.
Oh my God! Yes, I remember that bit. Yes,
which were the cases.
And his wife had to go listen, because he'll tell her like stories about crime scenes or different things.
Uncensored,
Yeah.
But I think Ellroy was showing how that was kind of perfectly natural to him. He didn't see, because of his traumas or because of his obsessions, he thought that was a good thing because, as he says to his wife, well, innocence kills. I don't want my daughter to be innocent.
Yeah.
I want her to be on guard and things like that. And I mean, I thought that the Lloyd Hopkins novels were good, strong novels, and there were definitely things that he learned about writing just by producing them.
But he also solved a crime, right? So he was a good cop.
Yeah.
He just wasn't a decent person in a way. What do you think? I mean, or do you think that's what James was saying? Is it that people have a bit of darkness in them?
Absolutely, and he was blurring the line between Hopkins and the psychopaths and the criminals he was going after. Yeah, and that Hopkins is walking this tightrope, and at any moment he could, have a breakdown, do something completely. Frequently does things illegal. It's the fact that he gets away with it is probably what makes him so compelling. But Ellroy has had a tough life himself. He's had, traumas. And he's managed to rise above them. The unsolved murder of his mother when he was 10, subsequent struggles with drug abuse, alcoholism. He's been homeless. He's done jail time.
And so he has a lot of darkness in his past.
He's had a lot of traumas, which obviously was very difficult for him to get over. In another sense, it was kind of valuable because he could mine them in terms of writing about character traumas and it's perfect for a crime writer. Perfect. He's often said he was lucky to be born in Los Angeles because it has this rich criminal history. It also has showbiz Hollywood and scandals beneath that, and the terrible cost these people pay to be famous, or even because Los Angeles has always been a magnet for people to move, people moving there and having their lives destroyed because their dreams, don't match the reality.
Well, it was a dream factory that wasn't real, so it was a fantasy land that was pure fantasy, wasn't it?
Yes, particularly in Ellroy's day. I think maybe we're all more cynical now in the digital age, but I think we're all pretty tuned to that being a star isn't all great. But particularly in the 50s, when there was the veneer of Hollywood was so much more stronger, that Ellroy felt privileged because his father had worked in Hollywood as a kind of insider. He was Rita Hayworth's business manager for a while, so he knew a lot of inside stories.
Was he ever on Hollywood sets, or did he ever visit Hollywood sets and everything?
As a child, he didn't visit movie sets, but he met Rita Hayworth at the Tale of the Pup hot dog stand, which is a landmark in LA. He was so little that he doesn't remember it. His father told him later that he spilled grape juice all over Rita Hayworth, which must have been embarrassing for his father.
Boy.
Yeah, particularly as a manager.
Yeah.
His father, Armand, actually planned Rita Hayworth's wedding to Prince Ali Khan.
All right.
And that was actually the first time a movie star had married royalty. This was before Grace Kelly married.
Oh yeah, I was going to say Grace Kelly.
Into the Monaco royal family. So his father really did see some things behind the scenes, and really gave him the inside scoop on.
So
what
he
Hollywood
gave
was
him
like,
yeah.
And was eventually fired by Rita Hayworth. So he had the full trajectory from moving to LA, trying to make it, getting lucky with Rita Hayworth, and then suddenly losing all of that.
Really?
He saw that.
What do you mean,
tragedy.
like lucky in an affair? You mean?
Well, his father did claim that he slept with Rita Hayworth. He's
just
never been able
wondering-
to
But I'm wondering
verify
if-
that claim.
But I'm wondering if his dad was Lloyd Hopkins, telling his daughter those raunchy little stories.
Well,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Come on.
yeah,
I'm a writer
absolutely.
myself, my friend. I'm just trying to say what inspires you, and everything. That's just really interesting. Speaking of that, but let's talk about the Black Dahlia story, because that was a famous, mystery that was never solved. But Elroy, did obviously the book that De Palma ended up making the film. Now I read that that was one of the few directors that Elroy liked, but then you were telling me that De Palma wasn't his first choice.
No, his first choice was David Fincher, who he was very friendly with for a number of years, and Fincher imagined it as a mini-series, which I thought would have been fantastic to really get the scope of the story. Unfortunately, that fell through. This is Hollywood. Nothing ever turns out in Hollywood.
No,
the way you
never goes the
expect
way
it,
you want
yeah.
it to go.
I think Ellroy, in terms of saying nice things about the film, he will do that on the publicity tour. He's got no choice. He wants the film to do well. He wants to sell books. He wants more books to be made. As soon as the film left the theatres, he did not hold back, either in public or in private. I know he hates that film, and it's probably bottom.
Can you tell me, what do you think he hated about it, though? Because, I'm a major De Palma fan.
Yeah.
And everything. And I know that De Palma has what do you call it? He has an indulgence about himself. He loves to paint, his films with these silent little big set pieces.
Yeah.
And stuff. Where he just there's about 2-3 minutes of just in silence. Of characters following each other in places. But what was it that you think that I didn't like about his version of the Black Dahlia?
I think he felt it was miscast, and also that
Really?
De Palma is
that.
De Palma is a horror film director at heart. That's what he felt, and that it was too gory, too many sick visuals, that sort of thing. But then it is a rather gory tale, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, who as Elizabeth Short was the woman, wasn't it? Who was
That was Maya Kirshner. Yeah, that was one of the few.
Maya Kirshner.
Yeah, Yeah, that was one of the few people he said something nice about. Yeah, the leads he wasn't so keen on.
No, really.
Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah.
stuff, yeah. And I mean, like, because now you shared with us, now this could be an exclusive. You shared with us an idea. I mean, I don't know who presented it to you there, but there was a person, a doctor, I believe, the detective who was on the case was thinking that the father may have been involved.
Yes, Steve Hodel is a retired LAPD detective,
Mm-hmm.
and he wrote a book called Black Dahlia Avenger after his father died at the age of 91. His father had been a surgeon in LA in the 40s and had subsequently emigrated to the Philippines and run a business there. He had a very tough relationship with his father. It was up and down. But when he started going through his father's things, he found two photographs of young women he believed to be Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia murder victim. He subsequently began investigating links between his father and Elizabeth Short. And to cut a long story short, he came to a quite credible theory that his father may have been the murderer of Elizabeth Short.
Wow.
Now, the connections with Ellroy are rather interesting because Steve Hodel and Ellroy got to know each other. They hit it off. And Ellroy endorsed Steve Hodel's book in print. Hodel asked for a blurb originally, and Ellroy said, "I'll write the introduction." He endorsed the theory, and then at some point afterwards, Ellroy began to sour on the book and withdrew his endorsement. We're not entirely sure why. Well, he told me a number of reasons. Partly because Hodel's book got too conspiratorial. He felt like Hodel was implicating that the entire LAPD knew that George Hodel, the surgeon, was the murderer, but George Hodel had blackmail material on them. They couldn't indict him. And this angered some people in the present day LAPD, where Ellroy has many contacts and is well regarded. But Black Dahlia Avenger by Steve Hodel is an excellent book about the Black Dahlia murder, and does put a fairly credible case that that George Hodel, his father, did the murder. I'd recommend
So
it.
you saying that Elroy agrees about this theory?
He did initially, and then he subsequently changed his mind.
All right. Do you think he did his own investigation and
Well, Ellroy was
because obviously he does a
yeah.
lot of research, doesn't he?
He does a lot of research, especially as a younger man, as a younger writer. Now he hires researchers just because the volume of research takes so
Yeah,
much
obviously.
time. Ellroy was first interested in the case on a personal level because he saw parallels between Elizabeth Short and himself. I think he fell in love with her a little bit. Here's this small Massachusetts girl who moves to LA and has her dreams dashed in the worst possible way. And him being Ellroy, having a lot of troubles as a young man, living on the streets, doing drugs, he just really connected with the woman. He was haunted by what happened to her. He'd have nightmares about the torture that she went through. Then when he became a writer and he'd written a few books that weren't so successful, he said to himself, I need to write the Black Dahlia murder novel because it's a story that will connect with a wide audience. And he researched the case very well. He was living in New York at the time. He'd go to the New York Public Library with a pillowcase, free triple reinforced pillowcases full of quarters, to get on interlibrary loan the microfilm footage of the microfilm newspaper clippings of day by day. The murder investigation was front page news on all of the four Los
They have
Angeles
clippings of her body.
They weren't allowed to show that.
Yeah,
No,
I would think so.
they weren't allowed to mention a lot of things back then. They weren't allowed to
So what
mention.
clippings would they have that he would be so interested in?
Well, they were covering the murder case.
So it would be just the stories.
It would be the stories of what the police were doing and who the suspects were or whatnot. They were covering the murder case because there was a lot of fear in Los Angeles that this would be a serial killer, and there was a tremendous pressure on the LAPD to solve it. So he had a lot of material to go on. He had the journalists' names, he had the names of the people the police were interviewing and whatnot. So he really structured his novel as adding his fictional characters and working it round the salient facts of the investigation. And then finally, providing a solution, because he didn't want to cheat the reader, even though the case isn't solved. He's going to give the reader their due. He will give them a fictional solution, which in its own way is plausible. And interestingly, his solution, which was that the painting was inspired by, the murderer was inspired by a painting of a character called Gwynplaine from Victor Hugo's The Man Who Laughs, mirrored Steve Adele's later factual explanation, because Steve Adele moved in the circles of surrealist artists at the time, like Man Ray, and he collected surrealist art. And Hodel claims that his father posed the corpse of Elizabeth Short with her arms outstretched and her legs spread wide and the two pieces separated to mirror one of Man Ray's paintings. So there were fictional, factual parallels between Ellroy and Hodel that were entirely coincidental. Ellroy and Hodel have both said that, entirely coincidental. But I think that's what drew those two authors together for a while. And they never had a falling out of any kind. They're still on good terms, but I do know that Ellroy regretted endorsing that particular book, and he withdrew his endorsement.
No, it's still fascinating stuff. I'm thinking when you say The Man Who Laughs, I'm wondering if, because you're talking about a picture, right? I'm wondering if that's the picture that inspired the Joker from Batman.
It was. You're absolutely right. It was a silent movie.
I'm absolutely right. I love it being told. I'm absolutely right. Yeah, no, it's crazy. Picture that.
Yeah, it's a silent movie. And in De Palma's Black Dahlia, Bucky Blightheart and Kay Lake, played by Josh Hartnett and Scarlett Johansson, go on a date to watch the film. And with the mouth cut from ear to ear, that inspires the Joker's.
Wasn't that one of the problems though? Was that triangle? That wasn't it kind of like a forced triangle? Was it a real thing or was it a fictional subplot with the two cops and the girl and stuff like that? Because Bucky, I think his name's Bucky, right?
Yeah.
He gets killed, doesn't he? Oh man, spoiler chase.
It's Blanchard who gets killed, who is the other cop, played by Aaron Eckhart in the film. Blanchard is the partner of Kay Lake to begin with. Bucky is Blanchard's friend, and there is this terrible love triangle thing where Bucky is falling for Kay hard. But he's got this loyalty to his partner and his best friend. But eventually, that
doesn't seem like Ellroy though. Hey, you know what I mean? It doesn't seem like Ellroy as far as like, I'm gonna write a subplot of a love story. Oh, unless I kill somebody, then maybe I will. You know, I mean, I never. Well, no, I guess when we're talking about LA Confidential, there's a bit of a love triangle in that one too, but that felt forced and stuff. When we get to that one, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, he's a fairly passionate guy, and
I mean, because you did say he had a lot of relationships.
He did, yeah.
You know, for a man who didn't grow up with a lot of love, you know, he seemed that he had a lot of. What do you think that was all about? That he just had like women and different things. I mean, did you think he ever found love, or like you said, he's with a partner now? Or?
He's certainly found love, and he's with his partner Helen Canote now, his second wife, and I know that they're very contented and that they found peace with each other. I think his parents' divorce, which was traumatic, then subsequently his mother's murder, left him very unanchored. Of course, he dropped out of high school. He never went to college, so a lot of the opportunities to have those early relationships where you figure out about women and what they're like kind of eluded him. And when you put in drug and alcohol abuse, it affects your sex life, it affects your sex drive, it affects your relations with other women. Then when he got clean at 27, he hadn't had much relationship experience, but I think he felt he really needed to catch up. He's like, oh, I've missed out on this wonderful thing. And coincidentally and conveniently, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, at that time was a perfect place to meet women and meet the opposite sex. And there was there was quite a promiscuous scene. It has to be said. This was pre-AIDS, so it was quite a carefree and very, I would just say, happy atmosphere. He certainly met a lot of women very quickly.
Well, he's also got a bit of fame as well.
Yeah, I think his fame came kind of mid-career. He had to, like you say, he had to write the Lloyd Hopkins novels. He had to learn as a writer. But yeah, he was a big, tall guy. I think he discovered himself quite late to be this kind of handsome guy, and just being a writer, no matter how famous he was, I think was a definite advantage.
Yeah.
At first, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about like his famous book, L.A. Confidential, because I mean that's what a lot of people probably are familiar with. Like the thing about this one was I just thought this was kind of like his Hollywood breakthrough. Would you say? Like you said, it was directed by Curtis Hanson, who was a big director at the time and stuff. But it had lovely Kim Basinger.
Yes.
He had the stars cut to be the women cut to be stars.
Yeah.
Or was she Veronica Lake and everything? But I mean, Russell Crowe, tour de force.
Yeah, he had a wonderful.
I mean, what did he think about the act? What did he tell you? You said his opinion about the version of the film. What did he think about the actors? I would love to know what he thought about Russell Crowe and Spacey and stuff like that.
I'm not sure how much I can say.
What do you mean?
Yes,
Please tell me he didn't like them.
He didn't like all of them, and I've heard some choice language which I won't repeat. But I mean, this was a breakthrough role for Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce. Mm-hmm. And in 1996, Ellroy was touring Australia, and he met both Crowe and Pearce.
Before the film?
Before the film. But I mean, the film was in pre-production, so we knew they were going to play the roles.
Did he know that they were from Far and Away? Or Home and Away? What is it? Home and Away?
It's Home and Away. And
no, Neighbours. Neighbours.
Guy Pearce was in Neighbours, wasn't he?
Yeah, both of them were the Neighbours, sorry.
He met them and he got along really, really well with them. And then he went to the set, and I know he didn't get along at all with Kevin Spacey, although I think he's somewhat been vindicated in that regard.
Well, nobody gets along with Spacey.
And he didn't get along with James Cromwell either. Well, I heard some stories about that. He got along fine with Crowe and Pearce in person. He said some nice things about Pearce's performance. He said some things about the other people's performance.
Come on, Steven, just tell us. Yeah. Just tell us.
Okay, well,
you're wasting time. What did he say about Russell Crowe?
Well, he says that Russell Crowe has no chemistry with Kim Basinger.
Well, no, he didn't though. I mean, you're right. He's totally right. He didn't. I mean, but that's why it was ridiculous when it just seemed like it was at the end that they just threw in the sexual subplot with Guy Pearce. You know, because it just seemed like, I mean, but he was a brute.
Yeah.
And I thought he played a brute well. I mean, it's like, because he just hated the fact that because you would think that when you tell us about James Ellroy's mom in the past, her being murdered and stuff, you could feel that maybe Russell was him.
Yeah.
Like he would become an avenger of things that would happen to women and everything like that. So you just say, oh, somebody's doing something to a woman, and it's like Russell's like, close up, knuckles breaking. And now that's why I would be surprised that he didn't like Russell, because Russell really played off that beast mode well. He didn't think so.
No, he didn't. He didn't.
Oh, man. Dude, you were picky. I love you, though. Still picky.
He has been remarkably picky. I mean, his works are difficult to adapt. And I know White Jazz was in production hell for years. There was numerous people attached to it. Nick Nolte was attached. George Clooney was attached. And it just never got made. And most of the films Ellroy's worked on as a screenwriter, he knows the film probably won't get made. As long as he gets paid, he's happy. He's very cynical about.
Like people often option his stories.
Yes,
and everything. That's really a good price and stuff. What about Danny DeVito? No.
Oh, he did like Danny DeVito.
I think
Yeah,
he like
yeah, yeah, and
that peekaboo thing, hush hush and everything. I love that line.
yeah. I know he liked Danny DeVito personally, and I believe Danny DeVito told him some absolutely unrepeatable jokes,
Yeah.
which I won't repeat here.
Well,
But yeah, he
well, I
did like
mean,
Danny DeVito.
despite the cancellation of Kevin Spacey, the character that he played, I just thought was great. The TV cop or the TV cop consultant,
Yeah,
um, and everything, and the what happens to him. I just thought it was great subplot, and it's one of those where you would say, yeah, yeah, Elroy, whatever he writes, he's writing such an intricate tapestry, that you're just completely drawn in through the map of this world to see the underbelly that he created in there with that. And I just thought it's a shame that he didn't like it because I would struggle to think what would you want somebody to have done to your story, excuse
yeah,
me, that they didn't do, because I would think that they didn't make anything up. You know what I mean?
yeah.
They only just delivered what was on the page. Do you have any insight into what it was that he just didn't like? Because you said that after he waited till Hanson had passed
Yeah.
before he shared his thoughts.
Well, I think it's probably progression. When the film first came out, I think James was genuinely excited about it, and then over the years he began to nitpick about it. And by the time Curtis Hanson died, his friendship with Curtis, he felt liberated in the sense that he could really slag the film off, in an unmitigated way. I don't think he's ever going to like a film adaptation of one of his works. I just don't think it's possible. I think he's one of these writers who feels so emotionally attached to the content. It's like what we were discussing earlier about his editing style, where he refused to drop subplots or drop characters. He'd rather just drop words. Whereas when you make a movie, you've got to do that. You've got to change things around just for the running time. Because if you filmed LA Confidential in its entirety, it'd probably be like 20 hours. So I don't think he's ever going to be satisfied. But I know, and this is in the biography, after Curtis died, Ellroy was invited to a screening of LA Confidential at the Egyptian Theatre in Los Angeles by Eddie Muller, the Tsar of Noir, who's a good critic and a great guy. And he was invited to introduce the film. And there were members of Curtis Hanson's family and friends of his in the audience who were under the impression it was some sort of kind of memorial screening. But Ellroy's opinion of the film was so negative that it went down very badly, and there were complaints. Wow. Yeah, so after that, because Ellroy created a scene, he said, "I'm not going to introduce the film anymore." He'd introduced it at many film festivals and whatnot, and he's like, I'll keep my opinion about the film. I'll be honest about the film. I'm not going to introduce it anymore. I don't want to create any more scenes. But there was one notable moment at one screening shortly before the stories about Kevin Spacey came out and Spacey was cancelled, where Ellroy was introducing the film and he was saying Spacey's performance is very, very poor. And a woman in the audience shouted out, no, he's a great actor. And he snapped back at her. It's like, you don't know him like I know him. So a lot of these stories were quite common as to who was the offender behind the scenes before the Me Too movement gathered momentum.
Yeah.
It was well known about the Weinsteins and the Spaceys. Everybody knew what they were doing. So that is interesting. I think it's good that we're now entering this new age of Hollywood accountability, because I think Ellroy's fascination with it growing up in the 50s was there was no accountability, there was the veneer. And you were talking about Spacey playing Jack Vincennes, the showbiz cop, who was working on this television show, which in the book is called Badge of Honor.
Which was kind of like a Dragnet type of show.
It was based on Dragnet, and Dragnet, which produced and starring Jack Webb. Mm-hmm. Jack Webb wrote a companion book to the TV show called The Badge, which Ellroy read as a young boy. And what was interesting about The Badge was it featured cases like the Black Dahlia. That's where Ellroy first learned of the Black Dahlia.
Oh, nice.
Because you couldn't show these cases, such as the Black Dahlia, on television. They were too gruesome, they were too graphic.
Yeah.
So he read the book, and suddenly it invites him as a child into this adult world and this secret world, which is seamy and grimy, also kind of glamorous in a disturbing way. And that was a seminal moment for him, and one that continues to inspire him to this day in his writing.
Well, and it also, as you can see, it permeates through the Lloyd Hopkins trilogy. So these stories that you're being very coy and sharing, are they in the book?
Yes, yeah.
Well, see, this is why he's being coy and sharing.
Yeah,
This is why he's saying you must read the book, Chase,
yeah,
which I will devour, and everything because even though it might seem to be like the musings of an opinionated man, it is also the collections of a fantastic, writer in that aspect. So in speaking of that, so in the creation of this biography, you said that you first met, James Ellroy in 2009.
yeah.
So you came across him through life, what as writers or because you did
Yeah,
some other stuff that you written. You said some
yeah.
treaties and stuff like that.
Well, yeah. The first thing I wrote on him was my PhD. My PhD at the University of Liverpool was on James Ellroy, so I flew to America. I had to get his permission to visit his archive at the University of South Carolina. And I said, look, I'm going to be in America. Can I come visit you? He was living in Los Angeles, and he said, sure. At the time, he was living in this wonderful building called the Ravenswood, which was built by the studios to house contract players back in the 40s and 50s. And it was, Art Deco and beautiful and very much of that Hollywood noir era. And his apartment was red walls, black furniture like what we're seeing in now. On the walls were photos, black and white photos of Los Angeles that a lot of them he'd taken from the LAPD archive. They were gifts. The only books on the shelves were his books. It was very, very. He was coming out of divorce at the time, so it was very sparse, and it was definitely his pad, his writing pad, where he just needed to look around and be inspired and engaged. And he was great. He was absolutely wonderful. He was very helpful to me in my research, and because I did these subsequent books on him, I would see him occasionally, and I stayed in his orbit. And it just occurred to me one day, I was just like, why isn't there a full-length biography of this man? He's written 2 memoirs. His story is fascinating. There are not many writers out there who have a story so compelling but also so traumatic. Mother murdered, homeless, criminal. Later, ironically, becomes a spokesman for the LAPD, often an apologist for the LAPD during various scandals. He would be out there defending their role, saying, I love the police do a great job, and things like that. I was like, somebody's got to write this story. And I decided, I'm going to write that story. I didn't tell him at the time. I waited until I got the contract before I
Which
actually
was
told
like
him.
about 10 years later. So that's a lot of due diligence
Yes.
and everything, and also you got hit by the lockdown. So it was
Yeah.
like you had to, because most biographies are a series of interviews, which you ended up doing on Zoom and stuff. How was that?
Well, it was good in some respects because lockdown forced shutdown of a lot of Hollywood productions. So I got to catch actors, producers, directors being at home, probably frustrated with less to do, and they would agree to talk to me.
Yeah, I'm just sitting in my underwear doing nothing. Yeah, what do you want?
Yeah. So it was actually a blessing, and
Yeah?
it gave me more time just to devote myself 24 hours a day to the book. And it was also because some of the Ellroy's a man in his 70s, therefore many of his friends are also in their 70s or older. I think the oldest person I talked to was James B. Harris, the director of COP, who's in his 90s. And he was wonderful. So I was thinking to myself, I need to talk to these people now before this generation passes
No,
away.
exactly.
And I
They're
don't
in the
want to
book
lose
as well.
their voice or lose their story. I want them to tell it to me now. And they were wonderful.
So they're in the book as well?
Yeah.
So give us who else would be in there?
Brian Helgeland, who won the
Oh,
Oscar
yeah.
as screenwriter of LA Confidential and has since directed
Yeah.
films about the Krays, and Dana Delaney.
I love Dana Delaney.
Yes,
My
she was
God, I've been
wonderful.
watching Tulsa King. I mean,
Yeah.
she hasn't changed since China Beach, man.
Yeah.
I mean, how come this woman does not age?
She is wonderful. She's remarkably beautiful and funny and
Oh, she
gracious.
is.
And there is a great story about Ellroy and Dana Delaney's relationship, which
Oh,
I
really?
won't spoil. But
Why do you make me beg, brother? I gotta wait to read the book to find that out.
it's all in the book. Yeah, it's wonderful.
She's
So, but
hot.
a lot of people, a lot of the Hollywood people, sometimes you wouldn't know them by their name, but you would know their work. For instance, the screenwriter Joe Stinson, he wrote Sudden Impact, and he coined the words "Go ahead, make my day."
Really? You
Yeah.
know, now when you said that, you just reminded me. I was going to say when we were talking about Lloyd Hopkins, how Clint Eastwood. Did you ever see Tightrope?
Yes. Yes. That's a great.
That film reminds me of the Lloyd Hopkins character. Do you think there's a relation there, or whatever
Well,
similarity or something? Or
very possibly. Very
it's a good
possibly.
movie though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great movie. But
Tightrope.
Joe Stinson was, I think he's retired now, but was a very in vogue screenwriter for a while, and he worked on an adaptation of Ellroy's novel Clandestine. He never managed to get the film made. It was sad, and I heard a lot of stories like that. It was the same with White Jazz, that it would just pass from one producer and one director and never get made. But Stinson was trying to make Clandestine for years, and he'd show the script around. Ridley Scott told him, "You've written this generation's Chinatown."
Oh,
Yeah, and that is a compliment and a half, isn't it? And it's
Yeah.
just sad. It would have been great on screen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, no, it's amazing. And so like, but basically, excuse me. So the book, you did the draft, like about a year ago. Uh, Finally got approved, and now it's coming out, and in February. So tell us, like, is this what you were telling us? Is this the first place it's going to be out? Tell us about that.
It's released on February 9th. You can pre-order it now. I am having my book launch at Linghams Bookshop in Heswall on February 28th, 7 p.m. It's get your ticket online. I'd love to see everybody there. I'd love to see you guys there. Linghams is a fantastic bookshop. It's had some wonderful guests over the years. They had Richard E. Grant recently.
All right.
They've had Simon Callow. They've had Peter James, the crime writer. They have many guests. It's a wonderful bookshop. And I'll be telling some of my stories there, and you can pick up a copy of the book. And
Would you be? And I asked you, would you be reading from the book?
yes, I'll be doing some readings from the book. Yeah, I've got two readings set out in mind I want to tell, because really I start the book. The first opening page is the report of Gene Ellroy's murder, because that's a perfect place to start and the story and bring the reader in. Then I jump back and tell the story of Ellroy's parents' lives from the beginning, from their birth. Now, as it happens, Ellroy's father was born at the end of the 19th century, served in World War One. So going from his birth right through to the present day with where Ellroy is now, you're really telling the story of 20th century America through the Ellroy family. And, World War One, World War Two, Ellroy narrowly avoiding service in Vietnam, the Manson family murders, and then publishing in the 80s, New York, at the height of print publishing, the recent advent of internet publishing and the challenges that's created for the book industry. There's a lot of history in this book, and I hope you'll definitely learn a lot about Los Angeles and a lot about American history through reading it.
Well, I know most people who probably will come up to you, wow, thank you for this book, will ask you the question, love me, fierce, and danger. Does it mean anything?
Yes, it is the closing line of Ellroy's novel White Jazz, and it's always been my favorite line of his. I just remember finishing that novel and reading that last line and almost, shaking with emotion at the power of it. And I thought Ellroy wanted to call it something like the Running Man or something. He had some strange
Running Man.
Yeah, he the Big Runner or something. He mentioned some titles to me, and I was just like, James. It just came in a synaptic flash. I said, James, why don't we call it Love Me, Fierce and Danger? And he's like, That's it. That's the title. That's what we're calling it. And it was right. Love Me, Fierce and Danger, The Life of James Ellroy. It's quite a long title, but it's a striking one.
And I got to tell you, I only had the pleasure, skimming through this, but can you just lastly, as we about to close out, um, you chose a particular film noir type of style in the writing of a biography. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, in many ways, my style of writing mirrors Alroy's style of writing in keeping it sparse and statico and direct to the point. So, Alroy's life, I begin with the line that Helen Cannode, his partner, told me that James lives life like he was shot out of a cannon. And that's very much James. She perfectly summed up James. And that line is in the introduction. And that inspired me that Alroy's kind of whirlwind life, it would be a very fast story. So you don't want to lose space and lose pages on excessive descriptions. You want to kind of honor that hard boil prose simply to fit in all of James's incredible life, all of Alroy's incredible achievements, but also the fact that he's juggling so many people at once. He's often juggling partners at once. He's juggling a book project with a Hollywood project, and to get all of that in, you need to tell the story quickly. But also people I spoke to, particularly friends or lovers who had him in their life for a year or two. It's like he walked through the door and then suddenly there's just this kind of whirlwind of activity and he completely upended their life. And then one day he's gone. And they often felt, abandoned or slightly put out by that. But they felt happy that he'd been in their life, that they were touched by his generosity, even if, they would have liked him in their life a bit longer. But I think a lot of his ex-partners I spoke to realized he had some trauma and some scars that was affecting his behavior in a way. But to get back to your original point, yes, my style really honors his style and honors his life, and I think that's the only way you can tell Elroy's life.
Well, this is technically, like as you said, your fifth book and everything, but and I actually what did you have coming up or percolating in your head? And you were saying that you want to go down a hard-boiled route. Yeah.
Well, I usually have. Well, I suppose I'm a bit like Elroy because I'm usually juggling 4 or 5 ideas. I'll toy with one of them, and one of them will break free. So yeah, I've written I've written fiction, and I've written hardboiled fiction. I've written historical fiction, and I'm hoping one of these ideas will break free. Now that the book is done and I've got this time on my hands, and I can start to think about what I do next. I'm not entirely sure what will break free, but one idea will break free. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it sounds fascinating because you were talking about a historical kind of period piece and everything, and I mean, we have this whole revisionist thing going on now, and everything, So delving back into that era would be fascinating to look at it with different sets of eyes.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to see what you come up with. Stephen, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having
I'm
me.
hoping you enjoyed this interview. It'll probably be the first of many,
Yeah.
and everything. Not just because of you, but because of Elroy. I mean, there's a lot of fans out there, and everything. And I'm pretty sure you're going to do an American tour, aren't you?
Well, American publications are, Bloomsbury quite wonderfully have a British publicist and American publicist, and they're both juggling all of these offers and reviews and interviews and whatnot, and it's kind of intense to say the least. But I've enjoyed this interview immensely. You've made me look at the book in a different way and made me think about things that I hadn't thought about in several months and aspects. I mean, there was so much to the story of this book.
Yeah.
That went into it. So it's definitely nice to revisit it. Thanks, guys.
Well, it definitely sounds like a pleasurable read and everything, and fan or no fan, and everything. So once again, I want to just say that Steve Powell book will become available next month. I think people can start ordering now. You said.
Yeah, you can pre-order it, and it will.
Where did they pre-order from?
Any good bookseller,
Like
or
Amazon
you could
or.
Amazon, Waterstones, Blackwell's, any bookseller you can think of, or local independent booksellers if you
Well,
prefer
it
that
can't be
way.
hard to find. Love Me, Fierce in Danger. The Life of James Ellroy, delivered to us by the fantastic Steven Powell and everything. And we hope to be there when we feel and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, big fans. All right, so this is Stephen Powell. I am Chase Johnson Lynch and everything, and you've been watching us here on the Liverpool Community Podcast. And you know what? We out of here.